Now, as the continent celebrates Africa Day, we take a look at the Organization of African Unity, OAU. South Africa is a founding member of the OAU and the AU, which evolved out of the OAU.
The Organization of African Unity was established in May 25, 1963. It was disbanded on the 9th of July 2002 by its last chairperson and former South African President Thabo Mbeki and replaced by the African Union. The birth of the Organization of African Unity in Addis Ababa emerged from the aspiration of a united continent as advocated by the fathers of independence. Its origins are the Union of African States, an early confederation that was established by Ethiopian President Haile Selassie and Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah in the 1960s, as well as subsequent attempts to unite Africa. The OAU had as its main goal the liberation of Africans from their colonial masters, which it largely achieved. The OAU was dismissed by the continent detractors as an organization that was destined to fail. An organization that did little to protect the rights and liberties of African citizens from their own political leaders, often labeling them as dictators.
As with many other things African, from the very beginning of its life, the OAU was dismissed by our detractors as an organization that was destined to fail. Each time it convened, its critics predicted that it would end in disarray and collapse. Nevertheless, the OAU proved our critics wrong.
Later in the years, the idea of creating the AU came to the fore. It was revived in the mid-1990s under the leadership of Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The heads of state and government of the OAU issued a Sirte declaration named after Sirte in Libya on September 9, 1999, calling for the establishment of an African Union.
This is therefore an occasion for us to pay tribute to the OAU for the work it has done during the 39 years of its existence. Apart from anything else, we must do this because we have to ensure that we do not present the step we're about to take as the death of the OAU, but its further evolution, given the changed circumstances in our continent and the world.
The declaration was followed by summits at Lome in 2000, when the Constitutive Act of the African Union was adopted, and at Lusaka in 2001, when the plan for the implementation of the African Union was adopted. It is important to recall the fact that the founding fathers of the OAU, which included the likes of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Ben Bella of Algeria, had their own vision for Africa, and this vision was inspired by the Pan-African movement.
In African democracy, the rulers listen to the ruled, and the majority to the minority. Our traditions teach us to respect each other, to share power.
The OAU was disbanded on July the 9th, 2002 by its last chairperson, South African President Thabo Mbeki, and replaced by the African Union. They aim to continue where the OAU has left, tackling challenges of poverty and conflicts, among others.
It's a moment that all of us have been waiting for. I'm very pleased to welcome everybody to this first session of the Assembly of the Union.
The formation of the AU came with a renewed focus of improving governance and the continent's economies. This saw the emergence of programs such as NEPAD and the African Peer Review Mechanism. And in South Africa, the move was endorsed, as my colleague Manelisi Dubasi reports.
The OAU was born in 1963, a year that saw more than half of South Africa's liberation leadership arrested on charges of treason. Today, in the very house where bannings were enacted, lawmakers were brought up to speed on the final act of the transition from OAU to African Union. Among them, former Rivonia trialist Andrew Mlangeni.
I think it's going to function well, provided, of course, we have the correct leadership in Africa. But my only problem about the effective functioning of AU is that we do not have democratic governments in South Africa, in Africa.
The union's objective is to involve the people of Africa in decision-making, a break with the OAU's top-down approach. This objective struck a positive chord with opposition parties.
There's no doubt that this body is highly geared to economic development being translated into human development, and that's what its objective is.
I think there is this perception that you need economic reform on the continent of Africa. You need strong economic regions on the continent of Africa, and the vehicle for achieving this will be the African Union.
Even though, admittedly, there are a number of problems, specifically on the issues of democracy and governance, but we should look at this development as a process rather than an end.
The proposed constitutive act of the union drops some OAU rules, like the clause of non-interference in another country's internal affairs. It's a clause many African dictators have used to oppress their citizens. Whether it survives will depend on the Durban African Union Summit.
The African Union has not been aloof to challenges posed by political repression on the continent. In 2007, the organization adopted the Charter for Democracy, Elections and Governance to address a tendency towards authoritarian rule in some African countries.
We've come a long way to integrate countries, develop common programs, be guided by common principles and values, and that's what Africa has been able to do over the past 60 years, and that is important. The second reason why you needed these efforts was that the continent was under colonial rule, so you needed this first to win, and then strengthen institutions and systems of sovereignty. Indeed, that is what has happened. Almost all countries in Africa now are independent.
The OAU and AU have made headway in reducing much of the conflict which plagued the continent, with fewer wars witnessed over their 55-year history. They have also sought to curb the tendency of leaders to overstay their welcome, advocating a cap in office of 2 terms. The AU has set its sights on improving the livelihoods of Africa's citizens, using as its blueprint the Developmental Plan Vision of 2063. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC News.